Imagine picking up a book written in what is supposedly your own native language, only to find you're having to read it at an absolute snail's pace just to understand it. Sounds crazy, right? But that's exactly what happens when readers from the Indian state of Tamil Nadu pick up literature written in Sri Lankan Tamil. Actually, the famous Indian author Akilan once noted that mainland Indian Tamils often mistake Sri Lankan Tamil for Malayalam, or sometimes even a completely different language altogether. It's a massive linguistic mystery. How on earth did a language sharing the exact same root become so vastly different just across a narrow stretch of ocean?
Okay, let's dive into this. Today, we're unpacking the fascinating heritage of a language that's been deeply shaped by a geographic isolation, shifting empires, and some pretty intense cultural cross-pollination. Now, to really grasp the language, we first have to understand the people speaking it. While Sinhalese is the majority language in Sri Lanka, Tamil is the largest minority language, spoken by over a quarter of the population. But here's the thing, it's not a monolith. The Tamil-speaking community here is beautifully diverse. We've got the Sri Lankan Tamils, who are primarily concentrated up in the northern and eastern provinces. Then you have the Sri Lankan Moors, many of whom are entirely Tamil-speaking in those same regions, while others are bilingual across the island. And finally, there are the Indian Tamils, historically brought over to work in the central hilly plantation regions. Each of these groups adds its own unique, deeply rooted flavor to the whole linguistic landscape. But here is a truly fascinating sociolinguistic fact that completely separates Sri Lanka from the mainland. So over in India, Tamil evolved with these highly distinct, rigid, caste-based dialects, like very clear divisions between Brahmin and non-Brahmin ways of speaking. However, in Sri Lanka, those strict caste dialect boundaries are remarkably absent. The sociolinguistic landscape here is defined much more by region and community. Think the distinct dialects of the northern provinces versus the Muslim dialects, rather than rigid caste lines. It's a completely different social architecture and is directly reflected in the spoken word. Which brings us to a pretty beautiful paradox. Sri Lankan Tamil is, well, it's simultaneously highly innovative and incredibly ancient. We're looking at a dynamic of rapid evolution on the mainland versus deep, deep conservation on the island. Sri Lankan Tamil acts almost like a linguistic time capsule. Because of its geographic isolation, it's conserved archaic grammatical and phonological traits going all the way back to the era of King Alala. We're talking the early centuries of the Christian era here. These are ancient linguistic structures that have literally been lost to time in modern Indian Tamil.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because while the language was busy preserving these ancient traditions, the island itself became this massive global crossroads. Over the centuries, global empires just continuously washed onto the island shores. The Portuguese arrived in the 16th century, followed by the Dutch in the 17th century, who ruled for 135 years, by the way. You also had robust Malay trade networks popping up, and eventually, British colonial rule. And look, you just cannot have that level of global traffic without it leaving a permanent, indelible mark on the way people speak.
In that mark, it's this vibrant tapestry of loanwords seamlessly woven into everyday daily life. When a Sri Lankan Tamil speaker asks for a chair, they say katairi, or for shoes, kapatu, straight from the Portuguese. When they cook beans, it's bun shi, which is a Dutch remnant, and that delicious, spicy side dish we all absolutely love, sampal, echoing centuries of Malay trade connections. These aren't just foreign words awkwardly bolted on either. They've been organically adopted and smoothed out over generations until they feel entirely 100% native.
Now, what's really interesting about this next part is how Sri Lankan Tamil handles the English language compared to Indian Tamil. Obviously, both regions experienced British rule. But Sri Lankan Tamil didn't just borrow English words, it fundamentally remolded them to fit its own native domestic rhythmic patterns. For example, for coffee, Indian Tamil says kapi, but Sri Lankan Tamil says kopi. Lori becomes lori in Sri Lanka rather than lari, and master becomes seer instead of sar. It's just a completely different phonetic philosophy at work.
But all of this, the ancient time capsules, the colonial loanwords, it all leads to the jaw-dropping twist of our explainer today. The real climax of Sri Lankan Tamil's evolutionary story isn't just about borrowing words from passing empires. No, it's about a deep, centuries-long structural convergence with the island's majority language, Sinhalese. Keep in mind, these two languages belong to completely different linguistic families. Tamil is Dravidian, Sinhalese is Indo-European. In theory, their underlying grammar and structure should be totally alien to one another. Yet, history brought them intimately together. Ancient Tamil grammar actually directly influenced the classical Sinhalese grammar text, the Siddhat Sangharava, which is still considered the absolute gold standard today. By the 15th and 16th centuries, Sinhalese poets considered Tamil, right alongside Sanskrit and Pali, as an absolutely essential literary language.
If you were an educated scholar on the island back then, you simply had to know Tamil.
So this immense cultural prestige and centuries of daily coexistence resulted in a massive, direct vocabulary transfer. The Tamil word for umbrella, kutai, becomes kudi in Sinhalese. Peti for box is exactly the same in both. Mulaya for brain becomes moli. I mean, we are talking about the most foundational, everyday objects and concepts here. It shows a level of intimate cultural coexistence that completely blurs the lines between two distinct ethnic groups.
And this brilliantly illustrates where the true magic happens, the syntax. Because of this shared history, these two totally distinct language families now mirror each other perfectly. Take the sentence, I want to go to the temple. In Tamil, it's Nan koyilakupa poga venum. Translated literally, that's I plus to the temple plus to go plus want. Now let's look at Sinhalese. Momokovalutu yanu onu. I plus to the temple plus to go plus want. It is a stunning, one-to-one, word-for-word grammatical mirroring. Try doing that with English and French. The word order would completely fall apart.
And this exact structural heartbeat echoes again and again in everyday phrases. We don't want anything. In Tamil, Engaluku ondrum vendam. In Sinhalese, apitu mokot epa. Despite originating from completely different roots, again, one Dravidian, one Indo-European, centuries of side-by-side living on one island have made the mental architecture of both languages identical. The words sound different, sure, but the way a speaker builds a thought in their mind, it's exactly the same.
This mirroring actually goes so deep that it even dictates how children learn their very first letters. When reciting or naming the alphabet, a Tamil speaker calls the letter A Ana. A Sinhalese speaker calls it Ayana. The letter I is Ina in Tamil and Iana in Sinhalese. Down to the very building blocks of literacy, the phonetic rhythm and cultural cadence of the two groups are just inextricably intertwined.
So the crucial point is this. When we look at ancient historical languages, like Latin or Sanskrit, they're often these frozen relics, right? They're beautiful, absolutely, but they're restricted to rituals and ancient texts. Sri Lankan Tamil, however, is a living heritage. It has survived from time immemorial, yes, but it actively breathes. It adapts, it borrows from colonizers, it merges structurally with its neighbors, and it flourishes in modern academia and everyday street corners alike.
Which leaves us with something pretty profound to think about. Sri Lankan Tamil is basically a masterclass in how human communication constantly evolves. It's quietly recording the history of empires, trade routes, and neighboring cultures right there in the very structure of its sentences. And the language you speak today? It's doing the exact same thing, right under your nose. So I'll leave you with this. How is your own language secretly absorbing the cultures around it? What hidden histories are locked inside the words you use every single day? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer,